Good morning in Germany, konnichiwa in Japan. Welcome to this outreach event of the German-Japanese Energy Transition Council. My name is Lotte Nowotnik, Project Manager of the Scientific Secretariat of the GJETC at the Wuppertal Institute. I'm honored to guide you through today's event. If you would like to pose a comment or a question, please use the chat function. Now, please welcome Dr. Stefan Thomas, Director of the Energy, Transport and Climate Policy Division at the Wuppertal Institute and the German co-chair of the GJETC. Stefan, good morning. What is on the agenda today?
Good morning, Lotte. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon to Japan, to everybody joining from there. And a warm welcome to this GJETC Outreach event. I'm very glad to see so many of you, which is showing continued interest in the results of GJETC. As you may know, we are organizing our work in annual activity programs connected to the Japanese fiscal year, which ends on 31st of March each year. This time we focused on two topics. The first was critical raw materials that are needed to produce the technologies for the energy transition, particularly for Germany's and Japan's contribution to the 28 target of tripling renewables by 2030. This may be a challenge in the current era of geopolitical tensions. Critical raw materials is a wide field. There are around 30 to 40 different materials that are defined as critical in Japan or the EU or the USA. And the needs are specific for each technology, such as photovoltaics, wind batteries, and electrolyzers. So we decided in the limited time that we had to focus on the analysis on batteries for stationary use of our vehicles. The second topic was carbon pricing and social acceptance, which was motivated by the imminent introduction of the EU's Emissions Trading Scheme 2, which is covering especially buildings and transport in 2027, as well as Japan's GX ETS in 2026 and the GX surcharge in 2028. For each topic, we prepared a fact sheet on important information, then had an extensive discussion at the GJETC's meeting in Tokyo on the 18th and 19th of February this year, formulated policy recommendations for the cooperation and mutual learning as the result. And these results are what we are presenting today. We hope that our results and recommendations will be informative and inspiring for you, and look forward to your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. On behalf of the Japanese co-chair, Mr. Terazawa, who cannot be with us today, I would like to ask Ichiro Kutani, Senior Research Director at the Institute of Energy Economics in Japan and head of the GJETC study team on the Japanese side, for some words of welcome, please.
Thank you very much, dear participant. Thank you very much for joining our webinar. My name is Ichiro Kutani, Senior Director at the IEJ. On behalf of Japanese co-chair, Professor Terazawa, Chairman and CEO of IEJ, I would like to welcome you all to GJETC Outreach today. Both Japan and Germany are in the process of transforming energy system toward carbon neutrality. However, still many challenges remain to be overcome in order to achieve that goal. GJETC, we started its activity in 2016 as a platform for Japan and Germany to learn from each other in order to solve issues related to energy transition. The GJETC has been involved in discussion in a number of areas, and in 2024, we conducted discussion on critical minerals and carbon pricing. There's a growing concern over the supply chain of critical minerals, as discussed with Stefan Thomas. And there's also the need to successfully use carbon pricing as a way to guide investment. These are very difficult questions to answer. However, I hope this webinar can give you some idea for thought. With this, I would like to conclude my remark. Please enjoy the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ichiro. Now, let us start with part one of our today's outreach. The presentation is on renewable energy sources and critical raw materials. Presenters will be Tetsuo Morikawa from IEJ and Frank Labunski from the Wuppertal Institute. And while Frank is getting started with the presentation slides, I would like to remind you that you may raise your questions or comments in the using the chat function. So with no further ado, Frank, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, Tetsuo, please start the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Lotte and Frank. Well, good morning to you all in Germany. I'm Tetsuo Morikawa at IEJ in Tokyo, and thanks for having me today. And me and Frank will spend the next 15 minutes to share what we did for this year's Japanese Energy Transition Council. Next slide, please. Right, this is the agenda of our short presentation, actually 5 of them. All in all, background of the research and critical minerals and policies in both countries, as well as in the EU, and policy recommendation before taking questions and discussion.
Sorry, I'm going to just interject and ask you to change your viewing. You have it on, you don't have it on presentation mode. So we see the next slide as well.
Like this, it's better?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, background, yes, is the background. We, as Kutani-san mentioned, we all know many minerals play an important role in energy transition through various low carbon technologies, including electric vehicles, batteries, storage, and wind and solar, and so on. And most likely demand will increase very, very rapidly, although the speed differs significantly among minerals, I understand. And supply concentration and export restrictions, volatile prices, those things worry industry and government, especially in important countries like Japan and Germany. And having taken these issues, next slide, please. Yeah, we decided to focus on so-called battery metals, namely lithium and nickel and manganese, cobalt and graphite. There are so many others, but these main 5 minerals we decided to focus on this time. Try to cover these questions on the slides, like demand growth and supply risks and policies and possible cooperation between Germany and Japan and hopefully beyond. Next slide, please. Right, there are dozens of critical minerals or critical raw materials. That's the term used in Germany and the EU, I understand. And so far, the EU listed 34 of them, and Japan listed 35 of them as critical minerals or materials. And actually, 21 of them are common between the EU and Japan, and including all these battery minerals we focused this time. And I think I hand it over to Frank for now.
Yeah, thank you very much. As already mentioned, the fact sheet focuses on battery storage and electric vehicles. And here you can see the demand for renewable energy technologies for different scenarios. And regardless of which scenario is considered, the International Energy Agency forecast an increasing demand for critical raw materials. and the global demand will increase by the factor 2 to 4 by 2040. And in red, here you can see the forecast for the demand for electric vehicle and battery storage. And here also an increase in the future demand is forecasted. If you now look at the expansion of battery capacity and new registration of electrical vehicles, we can see a similar picture. The chart above to the left shows the installed battery storage capacity in Germany. Currently, we have a storage capacity of 11.2 gigawatts, and forecast by the Fraunhofer Institute assume a required storage capacity of 100 gigawatt by 2030 and up to 180 gigawatts by 2045. So in other words, an increase by the factor 9 or 16 by 2045. The chart at the bottom left show the new registration of electric vehicles since 2015 in Germany. And even though sales of electric vehicles have risen in recent years, there was a decline in the market share of electric vehicles in 2024. And currently, combustion and hybrid vehicles continue to dominate new registration. And the market share of electric vehicles in 2024 was 13.5%. And in April of this year, the market share has risen again to 18.8%. However, the German government's target of 50 million electric vehicles by 2030 still seems unlikely to be achieved. Nevertheless, this development of both the stationary battery storage and electric vehicles shows that demand of critical raw materials will also increase in Germany. Tetsuo, back to you.
Thank you. Moving on to Japan. Import quantity in 2024 was about 5 million tons of copper and about just short of 2 million tons of battery metals altogether. Although I have to say it's difficult to capture the exact figures due to the lack of official open source reliable statistics or data. Supply chains, it's very complex, and Japan imports various materials, not only in the form of ore, but also various semi-finished or even final products. For instance, copper, manganese, and possibly graphite, mainly imported in the form of ore. On the other hand, as far as lithium is concerned, I understand the carbonate or hydroxide products are usually imported. Nevertheless, all in all, import sources are fairly or very concentrated indeed. Next slide on for Frank, please.
Okay, thank you. So having looked at the current situation in Japan and Germany, we now consider the existing policies on critical raw materials and supply chain diversification for both countries. So in Germany, the raw material strategy of the federal government has been in place since 2010. And the historical view of raw material supply was a market-driven perspective in which companies are responsible for the supply of raw materials, and the government has taken on a more supportive role. However, in the light of recent geopolitical developments, this point of view has been challenged. So trade disputes, the great market powers of individual players or countries, and the increased requirements to ensure social and environmental responsible supply chains had led to an increased government intervention. And the current raw material strategy from 2019 is based on 3 pillars, which are domestic raw materials, import of raw materials, and circular economy and secondary raw materials as a source for raw materials. The key point paper, Path to Sustainable and Resilient Supply of Raw Materials of the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action, expands the raw material strategy with the aim of providing companies with more support in securing the sustainable and also long-term procurement of raw materials. Here, the focal points are circular economy, resource efficiency and recycling, diversification of raw material supply chains, and ensuring a fair and sustainable market framework. And what is important to notice, so currently there is no policy in Germany that recognizes demand reduction as a way of closing the supply and demand gap. In the EU, the strategy is based on the Critical Raw Material Act, which includes their self-defined targets for reducing the dependency of raw materials from third country, as you can see here. And they aim at least 10% of critical raw materials are to come from European extraction by 2030, at least 40% of the annual consumption from EU processing, at least 25% from domestic recycling, and that not more than 65% of the EU annual consumption should come from a single third country. To achieve this goal, the EU wants to establish a critical raw material club with like-minded countries that also want to strengthen the global supply chain. And they want to strengthen the World Trade Organization. The EU wants to expand its network for sustainable investment and free trade agreement, and also take stronger action against unfair trade practices. Tetsu, back to you.
Okay, this is a brief summary of Japan's policy. Stockpiling started fairly early back in the 80s, but it was China's embargo in 2010, really, that urged the government to enhance supply security measures. And I believe more minerals are covered as a critical, and more stockpiling taking place, I understand. Although the detail of stockpiling, I mean the amount or location, things like that, those details are not disclosed due to this, well, security reasons. And one of the characteristics of Japan's policy is the sort of aspect of manufacturing industry policy. Battery storage industry strategy in 2022, for instance, aims at battery manufacturing capacity of 600 gigawatt-hour per year. And of that, 150 in Japan in the year 2030, based on assuming that capacity is made. The policy paper assumes the annual demand of minerals, for instance, 100,000 tons of lithium and so on. And well, you might notice that these figures are considerably lower than those I mentioned on page 8, I think, and this is primarily because figures on that page include not only ore but also products. Anyway, the government provides incentives for mining and refining developments and mineral efficiency, R&D for alternative materials and so on. The latest strategic energy plan emphasizes securing adequate stockpiling and supply diversification and domestic resource developments, as well as aims to achieve self-sufficiency rate of 80% for copper and the other base metals by 2030. Right, next slide, please. Yes. Comparing policies of Germany or the EU, indeed, or that of Japan, there are lots of similarities. I understand that this is not really surprising because both countries are net importers, anxious about supply stability, have substantial industry base, and anticipating rapid demand growth of minerals. So supply diversification, stockpiling, and domestic resource development and demand control, and what the EU calls CRM Club or International Alliance, like among like-minded countries. Therefore, Germany and Japan are, I have to say, heading towards this pretty similar or same direction policy-wise, and have a great potential to work together. Over to you, Frank.
Yes, I agree. I will go into this into further detail in a minute. But before that, if we look at the critical raw materials and their distribution and production, as we see in this chart, it becomes clear that neither Japan nor Germany can achieve self-sufficiency in critical raw materials. And of course, this is mainly due to the lack of national resources. However, China in particular controls the production and value chain for many critical raw materials. And of course, one focus is on the battery production, where China is currently the largest producer and consumer for electric vehicles. However, this, you could say dominance is only part due to domestic resources, but also due to investments in international mines, domestic production capacities, and also subsidies and energy prices. And the aim of Japan and Germany should therefore be to diversify their supply chain in order to reduce the dependency on individual third countries. And as I said, here, the dependency of China should be mentioned. However, Tetsu, as you already mentioned, we have some policy recommendation. In fact, we have 6 key policy recommendations that we explored in our fact sheet, which are really recommended to read later on. And these 6 recommendations are the critical raw material demand and supply outlook, demand reduction, circular economy principles, domestic production, the access to international markets, and a critical raw material club or partnership, as you already mentioned. And I would like to go into a bit further detail. Lotte, just one quick comment. If we skip the time frame, please let me know, and I will try to make it as short as possible. So firstly, any policy and strategy and cooperation should be based on long-term outlooks. And such outlooks should incorporate multiple scenarios and also assumption. And they, of course, should be updated regularly. On the supply side, not only mining, but also processing and the final product should be considered. And as we just elaborated earlier, China holds a predominant position regarding critical raw materials, and their approach should be further examined. On the demand side, regular monitoring and analysis of critical raw material industries and also the markets are essential. And here, sharing insight and intelligence between Japan and Germany can be mutually beneficial. Next, we have demand reduction. This should be the first step to reduce the dependency on critical raw materials. Here, we suggest a combination of substitution, efficiency, and also sufficiency measures. And with regards to the substitution, alternative batteries such as maybe sodium-ion batteries can be used to reduce the demand for critical raw materials for battery technologies, in particular, of course, the lithium-ion batteries. With efficiency and sufficiency measures, they both should be considered along the entire value chain. And efficiency measures in the transport sector, for example, can reduce the energy demand, but also in addition, maybe the possible reduction of the raw material requirements. Possible sufficiency measures are, for example, carpooling, use of public transport, cycling, and so on. The recycling and utilization of secondary raw material is playing an increasing role. Recycling is not really a new measure, and it's already implemented. However, we further suggest introducing the introduction of binding quotas for the utilization of secondary raw materials, and this quota should increase continuously over time. Next is the increase of the domestic production. The national extraction of critical raw material should be increased. Of course, yeah, this is possible. Raw material are domestically available. But for example, this would be the case with lithium in Germany, where they have an estimated of 3.8 million tons in Germany. And Germany therefore has the 7 largest lithium deposits in the world, even though they're currently not really mined highly. And to make
Okay. Just a short notice that try to come to an end.
Okay, yeah. Just let me skip this real quick. So, yeah, next point would be the access to international markets. Of course, this is really important for competition and yeah, to have influence. I will just keep this short and skip to the next point, which is the critical raw material club. And this is based on a measure proposed of the EU, a club of like-minded countries willing to strengthen global supply chain. And we highly recommend that this should be established. And there are several advantages, such as sustainability, competitiveness, and also implementing and enforcing ESG standards, such as having more negotiation and more power in general, and secure the supply of critical raw materials. And of course, please feel free to see the fact sheet for further details. And I will now come to an end to my presentation and give back to you, Lotte. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you also, Tetsuo. We already do have 2 questions in the chat. Just a quick reminder to the audience, if you have further questions or comments, feel free to post them in the chat. And as Frank also mentioned, we will upload, or the fact sheets are uploaded on the website, so you will get the URL later on, as well as the presentation slides. So the first question comes from Professor Yoshino, and he asks, is there a cost-benefit analysis in battery storage technologies? Which goes very well with my questions on, well, you mentioned several policy recommendations very quickly. What are the most cost-effective strategies to increase self-sufficiency of critical raw materials? Who would like to start answering this question? Maybe Frank, will you?
Yes, certainly. I can start, and maybe Tetsuo, you can continue. So, to my knowledge, we haven't seen any cross-benefit analysis, but maybe Tetsuo know more with regards to this. To the second part of the question, what is the most effective measure? So, I would think that maybe it is the demand reduction, that we have sufficiency, efficiency measures, and these are relatively cost-effective. However, we have to have in mind that this will not lead to self-sufficiency of Germany or Japan as a whole, as this is not a goal that should be achieved, but more reliable supply chain. And as I mentioned earlier, however, all these policies should be combined and seen as a whole and not looked individually. But Tetsuo, maybe you have more insights with regards to the cross-benefit analysis.
Yeah, cost-benefit analysis, I believe there are, but and the problem is I can't really pinpoint which part, which institution. Maybe IEA does, and some university do, I believe, and private sectors. Sorry, I can't be pinpoint on that. And as far as the cost-effective measures, I generally agree with Frank. Especially in terms of well, there's no one single silver bullet kind of thing. Let me put it in this way. A host of so-called portfolio of measures. They're all, I think, important. But as far as Germany and Japan is concerned, we are net importers. So demand side measures, recycling, alternative material development, things like that, and of course stockpiling as a last resort. Those are the things it could be prioritized. But also all the supply measures with with the emphasis of especially supply diversification, it's really important. Something Europe and Japan could work together. And okay, I'm aware that we're losing time. And if I can move on to the next question I'm looking at on the screen, what does self-sufficiency in Japan mean? It's a good question because Japan does not really produce copper ore, not any significant amount. So this is basically supply quantity overseas with Japanese presence, which means that the projects with Japanese companies' investments. So it's a very wide, ambiguous concept, and yeah, also I think it also includes a possible recycling amount as well. So it's a very wider concept. Thank you. That's it so far from me.
All right, I was about to say thank you and move on, but there has been another question. Thank you, Tetsuo, for also keeping an eye on the chat. There has been another question from Long Pan. Could you, I will just read it out loud because it just popped out. Could you share your thoughts on the CRM issue related to hydrogen in EU, especially regarding water electrolyzers for green hydrogen generation?
Yes, certainly I can share my insights. So yeah, just to give a little bit of scope, in this fact sheet, we just analyzed lithium, cobalt, nickel, manganese, and graphite and copper. And basically we focused on battery storage. Now, when it comes to hydrogen, other critical raw materials might be more important. Maybe we can have this look in a later analysis. So we didn't focus on this. However, when it comes to green hydrogen, we also have to consider the additionality of green renewable energy, electricity. And currently, at least in Germany, most of the hydrogen is still not green, more gray. So this could be a way to, also to consider. But with regards to the critical raw materials, we haven't looked at in the fact sheet.
All right, thank you very much, Frank. There's another question which partly relates to the next presentation, so maybe we can just keep it back for now. And a final question maybe regarding the alternatives to lithium. To what extent are sodium-ion batteries feasible for both countries? As far as I know, sodium-ion batteries have lower energy density and hence are able to store less energy for the same size and weight, especially difficult for vehicles, etc. Maybe a quick answer from your side, either one.
Yes, absolutely true. We just considered this point briefly because we should emphasize on further research. I mean, there are different battery technologies that we can combine, but we certainly are aware that just switching everything to sodium ion is not the approach to go. However, if we combine all the topologies, this is one point we should consider, and maybe not only sodium ion batteries, but also using them as one of many different battery technologies. So a really good point. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you once again to Frank and Tetsuo. We would like to move on to the next presentation entitled Carbon Pricing Opportunities, Challenges and Social Acceptance. Here the presenters are the German co-chair, Stefan Thomas himself, together with Toro Shimizu and Ichiro Kutangi. So now the floor is yours, Stefan.
Yeah, thank you. And hello again to all participants. Next slide, please. For this topic, we would like to briefly touch about the background, why this is important, then what are the sectors and ways of carbon pricing and the existing and planned schemes in both the EU and Germany and Japan. Third, then what are the categories and mechanisms of impacts that carbon pricing may have, and what could be measures to improve the social acceptance. And finally, the policy recommendations that the GJETC developed in its discussions. Next, please. So here it is. The background is that many countries, including the EU, Germany, Japan, have ambitious energy transformation and climate mitigation goals and targets, and need stronger measures. And carbon pricing may not be the silver bullet, but it will improve cost effectiveness. But through auctioning or carbon taxation, also generate revenues to stimulate the investments that are needed for achieving the goals and targets. Carbon pricing may have intended impacts, namely to reduce the carbon emissions, but also unintended impacts on the competitiveness of industries and on the social distribution of benefits and costs. And these unintended impacts may put social acceptance at risk. So both the policy design of the carbon pricing schemes themselves and the use of the revenues that they generate need to address the unintended impacts to improve acceptance. Next, please. The sectors to be covered are, on one hand, the energy supply sector, so power and heat generation, but also the energy demand sectors like industry, buildings, and transport as the three main energy demand sectors, but energy end-use sectors, but also potentially other sectors like agriculture, waste, or land use change. So what do we understand as carbon pricing? And we suggest to follow the OECD here. So it is not only explicit carbon taxes or carbon emissions trading schemes, but also the fuel excise taxes that have for a long time existed in many countries. In addition, the OECD also defined net effective carbon rates, which include the energy subsidies that still may be existing in many countries. Next, please. So we see that the EU will soon cover all sectors with, or almost all sectors with the emission trading schemes 1 and 2. And it is also introducing the carbon border adjustment mechanism for energy intensive goods. In Germany, there's also, so the EU ETS 1 has been existing since 2005 for the power sector and large heat generators, including in the industry and also some industrial processes that emit greenhouse gases. Germany, since 2021, has a national emissions trading system for the other sectors that are not covered by the EU ETS 1, and this will mostly be replaced by the EU ETS 2 from 2027, which also covers the other sectors, notably buildings and transport. There's also an energy tax on fuels and an electricity tax in Germany. Japan has introduced the GX ETS as a voluntary scheme from 2023 and will achieve full operation from next year. From 2033 onwards, there will be an auction of emission allowances for the power producers. Until then, free allocation. And following grandfathering principles. It also has fuel taxes for a long time, and it plans to add the GX surcharge on carbon emissions for all fuels from 2028. Next, please. So the effective carbon rates in both countries seem to be higher in Germany or the EU than in Japan, which is the red color. They come closest in Japan for road transport. Next, please. Whereas if we look at the outcome that consumers see, which are the effective energy rates in both countries, they are relatively similar for comparable energy products like industrial electricity consumption, fuels for heating buildings, or transport. One notable exception is that electricity prices for residential consumers have been higher in 2023, considerably higher than in Japan, but they are now reducing too. Next, please. So what are the categories and mechanisms of impacts and measures to improve social acceptance? The desired impact is reducing carbon emissions. The side impacts may be negative, but also positive on competitiveness, depending on industries that produce carbon mitigation technologies, for instance. They may have positive impacts. And the social and distribution impacts may also be negative, especially if carbon prices rise a lot. And they depend on the way in which the revenues are used to cushion such potential negative impacts. So the measures to improve social acceptance include financial and technical support in reducing emissions or reducing the energy price increases due to the carbon pricing. So that could be a compensation via reducing energy taxes or prices, or a compensation via lump sum refunds per capita or household or company. We call that Klimageld in Germany. And again, here the appropriate use of the revenues from carbon pricing is important. Next, please. So what is an appropriate level of carbon pricing? That may depend on the ambition of carbon mitigation policies and targets. The OECD estimated a high carbon price needed between 200 and 400 US dollar per ton for achieving or coming close to the 1.5 degree target, whereas the high-level Commission on Carbon Prices recommended somewhat between 60 and 127 US dollars for the 2 degree targets. And the high costs would be reflective of the damage costs and the marginal abatement costs. But next slide, please. The effectiveness of carbon pricing is much higher if it is embedded in a policy mix that also supports the implementation of technologies and solutions to reduce carbon emissions. So studies in Germany have shown that with the policy mix, in 2030, maybe a price of 50 to 100 tons per ton of CO2 equivalents may be enough to achieve the target. Whereas studies that focused on carbon pricing alone saw the need of prices of up to 300 tons per euros per ton of CO2. There's also the role of carbon pricing depends on the marginal abatement cost, but I won't go into detail on that graph, but we'll pass on now to Toru Shimizu from IEJ, the main co-author of our studies.
Thank you very much, Stefan. My name is Toru Shimizu from Institute of Energy Economics Japan. And thank you very much for the time to discuss about the carbon pricing in February. It's very fruitful and great opportunity to discuss about this. So I would like to explain about the rest of the slide. And this slide shows the concerns on the competitiveness. So in both Germany and Japan, companies worrying that the higher energy and production cost pricing might lower the profits or make their products more expensive compared to overseas competitors. But there have about a study by the German Central Bank found no clear negative impact on competitiveness until 2020, when carbon price was still under 30 euro per ton. So in fact, carbon pricing can also create new business opportunities, especially for companies that develop and provide low carbon technologies. So the key is to combine carbon pricing with government support, such as subsidies and tax incentives or technical assistance. So this helps companies reduce emission while keeping their competitiveness. And in Japan, for example, support measures were introduced before car pricing, which helped business prepare in advance. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the Japan's new idea is a GX bond. The government plans to raise 20 trillion yen by 2032 through car pricing. This funding will support many sectors like steel, transport, energy, and housing to move toward low carbon futures. And already 3 trillion yen has been allocated, including 100 billion yen to help companies install innovative electric furnaces. And this is not just a price on carbon, it's a way to provide government support for green transformation before they introduce carbon pricing. And the next slide, please. And the next is the social impact. So if energy price rise, lower income households may face a bigger burden. They often cannot afford to invest in energy saving equipment. It's very expensive. But if the government provides financial support, therefore these families can still benefit from the energy transition. So they can buy the energy saving equipment. So for example, government subsidy for energy efficient housing and the public assistance for switching to greener fuels, and reduce utility bills for small businesses. This is funded by the car pricing revenue. So such support measures makes the policy more fair and easier for the public to accept. And the next slide, please. So how can we build public trust in car pricing? Here are 3 key strategies. It is based on the discussion about the GJETC. The one is offer technical financial support for households and businesses to reduce emissions. And second is provide targeted rebates or subsidies to lower and middle income families. And finally, use public funds to reduce electricity costs for small firms. So the combination of these measures works best. And it's also important that the government explain clearly how the support is provided and who benefit from it. And the next slide, please. And finally, we would like to share with the GJETC policy recommendations. And one key recommendation is this. And car pricing must be combined with design public support policies. The government should use the revenue to fund clean energy projects and support energy saving investment and help both families and companies adjust to the new system. So public support is strongest when people feel the benefit are fair and visible. And the second, next slide, please. And the next slide is considered as CBAM and allocation and offset. The second message covers 3 points. The first is a CBAM. The EU has studied a system to check carbon in import and imports. And this system will be started 2026. But Japan may think about a similar idea. It is not unclear, but it is based on what other countries do. And the second point is the allocation of allowances. So Germany used to give allowance for free, but now uses auctions. The Japan still give many allowances for free, but the Japanese government plan to auction them in the power sector by 2033. And the final point is the use of offset credit. The EU no longer accept them, but the Japan may still allow them to support emission cuts in other countries or other non-ETS sectors. This could be part of the international teamwork or internal teamwork, excluding the ETS sector. And our final slide, next slide, please. And our final slide is price stability. It's a very important point. And if car price rise too fast or fall too low, it create problem, such as we can easily imagine think about the EU ETS experience in 2010 to 2018. It's a very low price, the EU price. So many experts say we need limits. It means the floor price and the ceiling price. The EU uses a system called the Market Stability Reserve, we call the MSR. It keeps the market stable while letting the price more naturally. Although Japan will introduce the floor price and the ceiling price in 2026 in GJETC. And in any case, clear and stable price help business and families run better. Next slide, and the final slide. So thank you very much. Our presentation is over. Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you, Stefan, and thank you, Toru. We have already many questions in the chat, and I believe that the first question that was raised earlier already has been partly answered already. I will get back to it in a moment. For now, I would like to start raising the question that is put forward by Yoshino, Professor Yoshino. Current carbon prices are so different from one country to another. Is there a good way to harmonize the carbon price in various parts of the world? And maybe together with the next question, so that you can maybe sort your thoughts and respond to them at one time. Small businesses are not participating in carbon trading and carbon pricing. Are there ways to bring small businesses as well also in the carbon pricing scheme? And here, Jan, maybe to also add this, Jan already mentioned that it is important to and efficient for the state to set the path for companies, or is it like a question? Is it more important to for the state to set the path for the companies, or is it more important and efficient to set the goal for climate neutrality by 2045 and the consequences? Allow companies to develop and implement their own solutions. Maybe for the moment, these two questions, these 2 or 3 questions in one comment. Who would like to start? Maybe Stefan? Do you have first thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks for giving me the word, and thanks to the audience for the questions. The question is, should carbon prices be harmonized between countries? I think that does make sense where the EU has created the CBAM for the energy-intensive industries, because here production processes and costs around the world, input costs may be more comparable than in other sectors. That is why we also compared the final result to the consumer, namely the effective energy rates. In some countries, the basic prices for energy may be higher or lower, and so there is more or less room for carbon pricing to achieve similar factor prices for energy or consumer prices for energy. But I think it is important, the question how to include SMEs and how to treat companies in general. And I think neither of the alternatives in the questions really is the solution, because just letting the carbon price work may lead to prices of 200 or 300 euros or US dollars per ton, as studies have shown. And nobody intends to prescribe the path for companies. Instead, I think it's wise, as for instance it's done in Germany and the EU, to let companies find their path by a combination of support for SMEs for energy advice, energy consultancy, and by obligations for larger companies to introduce energy management systems. We have the same in Japan, and or have regular energy advice. And then also supporting the investments, as also both countries Japan and Germany are doing that have been found useful and appropriate for the individual company to pursue their path towards energy efficiency and defossilization. And there was also another question about the low income or older households for the renovation of their buildings. Here too, it's similar, a combination of advice and financial incentives, low interest loans, and what we still miss in Germany is that the state also gives guarantees to the banks, or that we have innovative schemes like property associated financing.
Okay, thank you very much, Stefan. Is there anything you would like to add? Toru?
Yep. Thank you very much for the question. Harmonization is very difficult program. So the way it's one's idea is a common tax in the world. But most of the countries say no to introduce the common carbon tax. But today we are explaining about the German EU and Japan's situation about the carbon pricing. This is very big differences there. But the almost same system, but the detail is not same. Some point we using the benchmark system in GJETC and almost same as EU, but it is not same. It's still not the same allocation method. So there are many points of there are many points to the difference, and those differences are making the price difference between the countries. And the second point is that the SMEs, and I think that most of the SMEs pay for the carbon tax, including the energy tax. Therefore, most of it is not directly paid for the carbon pricing, but it is like a indirect tax. It is including the energy prices. And the one idea is using the offset mechanism internally. So we have the Japan credit mechanism internally, and it is the making the project to reduce emission in the SMEs. Therefore, the making the credit to it can be sell for the market or the other companies which are covered by the GJETC. So it is one of the way to including the SMEs in the carbon pricing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. There was a last question on the acceptance that might be improved by explaining how the collected money is used. In Germany, this is explained. So is there any, how is the money used in Japan? We are running out of time right now, so maybe if you could just comment in one sentence, and then we will come to an end here.
Okay. The GX bond, the revenue from the GX bond are using for the roadway to the low carbon technologies. And some of the point is introduce a new electric furnace, and some other is to develop new technologies such as the new PVs technologies and the CCS and hydrogen and ammonia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the vivid discussion, for the many questions that have reached us. Please note once again that the presentation slides will be uploaded later on, as well as the video recording. Maybe, Stefan, you would like to close the meeting with some final remarks now.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for the questions, and Lotte for the moderation, everybody also from the team for organizing this outreach event. Yeah, we have seen that for the critical raw materials, a collaboration of like-minded exporting and importing countries, such a club or a partnership, seems important to ensure sustainable and fair extraction, processing, and fair distribution, and hence the energy transition. So this needs to strengthen rule-based trade system and climate policy again. So including the efforts under the World Trade Organization and the UN FCCC. But as in other areas of global governance, there may be room for closer collaboration among like-minded countries, which may be including the EU, Japan, and others. For the carbon pricing, there is a need to analyze the sectoral greenhouse gas abatement costs, the economic and non-economic barriers to mitigation actions, and the market conditions for both an effective design, especially for an emissions trading scheme, which is more complex than a carbon tax, and for measures to optimize the impacts on social equity and competitiveness, so minimize negative and maximize positive impacts. And so, as we have seen, the use of any revenues from energy or carbon taxes or from an auction of ETS certificates is important. We are hoping to continue our collaboration in the GJETC for the current fiscal year, which will be our 10th year of cooperation. We are still discussing with partners from the IAEJ in Japan what could be the topics. We have a long reserve list of topics, as you can imagine, and the energy transition and technology developments are also dynamic. So we would be glad to welcome our Japanese friends for our meeting in Germany this time. And all the participants, please watch out what will be next from the GJETC, and we hope to see you again at our public outreach events or maybe as invited guests at one of our stakeholder dialogues. Thank you again for your participation in today's outreach event.
Thank you also once again. And last but not least, we would like to thank our funding institution, the former BMWK and the METI. And now we would like to wish you a very nice day and of course to Japan. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.